Okay, here's a theory that's either complete nonsense or absolutely true. The Flash from 2023 isn't the end of the DCEU. In fact, it was the beginning of James Gunn's new DC universe, and Superman might be the film that actually kind of quietly confirms it. Yeah, I know. The Flash was a box office mess, buried under controversy and CG baby nightmares. It looked like the final nail in the coffin for the Snyderverse and everything else connected to it. But if you start paying attention, not just to the marketing, not just to the visual choices, but the recurring collaborators and Gunn's own very strategic vagueness, it starts to look less like a discarded relic and more like a foundational block. Okay, but for this, we have to go back to 2022. James Gunn and Peter Safran take over and form DC Studios. Everything is in flux. The Snyder cult is still licking their wounds from the Black Adam cameo, Warner Brothers is cleaning house, and 4 leftover DCEU films are about to stumble into theaters like wounded animals. Shazam! Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. But Gunn doesn't treat any of them equally. Not even close. He barely mentioned Shazam 2, says almost nothing about Aquaman's sequel, gives Blue Beetle a friendly shout out praising Zolo's acting and promising that he'll be back in the DCU, which sounds like we're keeping the actor just not the movie, although I think he pretty much said that if I'm not mistaken. But as for The Flash, Gunn talked about that like it cured his seasonal depression. Here's some of the quotes. One of the best superhero movies I've ever seen. Andy Muschietti did an amazing job. It's fucking amazing. He even went on and said that it was his favorite movie of 2023 over his very own Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which, he wrote and directed. That's not studio-mandated PR fluff. That, my friends, is a message, a very loud and very pointed message. And if Gunn wanted to distance himself from the previous DC regime, he could have buried The Flash under a pile of polite indifference. Instead, he hyped it like it was the cornerstone of something new. And back then, nobody really realized it. But now, I have to ask the question, maybe it was the cornerstone of something new. Because here's where it gets really interesting. Superman, that comes out here in July, is a movie that's supposed to mark the official beginning of Gunn's DCU. It shares a lot of visual DNA with The Flash. Both films were shot by cinematographer Henry Braham, who's also worked with Gunn on The Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and 3. Braham's style is distinctive, mobile, immersive, intimate. He uses lightweight red cameras, wide-angle Leica lenses, and a minimalist setup that lets the camera float through the scenes like it's part of the conversation. In his mind, it's a style built for storytelling flexibility, and it shows up time and time again over both of these movies. This would be The Flash and Superman. Now, I want you guys to go back and watch The Flash, of course, if you dare. And then go and watch the Superman teaser, the extended Minecraft preview, and the newly released official trailer. The color, the lighting, the camera movement, there is a shared rhythm there. It doesn't look like Zack Snyder's Justice League. It doesn't look like the Batman. It looks like the next phase of the same visual language tied to an interconnected universe that relies on that same visual language. So if Gunn is trying to establish a brand new DCU, why does his Superman movie look like it was shot in the same timeline as The Flash? Because maybe, and again, I want to make this abundantly clear, maybe it was. Now let's talk canon, because that's important. Canon matters. Or in this case, more accurately, Gunn's definition and idea of canon, because it's about as clear as mud. And that might be intentional. Now, he has said that Creature Commandos was the official start of the DCU. That's his clean line in the sand. But he also said that Peacemaker's almost entirely consistent with the new canon, except for that one time Justice League showed up in the end of the show. As for the Suicide Squad, Gunn described it as an imperfect memory, which is such a Gunn thing to say, but it's also really fascinating. Imperfect memory. That is not a hard no. That's not a reboot. That's kind of multiversal speak for maybe. That's like and it happened maybe just not quite the way you remember. If anything, it's the perfect cover for a character or a film to be canon if and when Gunn wants them to be. And what is The Flash, narratively speaking, if not the ultimate imperfect memory machine? The entire movie is built around time travel, multiverse resets, and causality spirals. The ending literally swaps out Ben Affleck for George Clooney, and you don't get more imperfect memory than that. And also, by the way, guess who approved that cameo? That was James Gunn and Peter Safran. After they had watched an early cut of the movie, they suggested Clooney. They reached out to him. They brought him in, and he shot the scene one morning in January 2023. It wasn't a leftover from the previous DC film's leadership. This was a Gunn play. A wink, sure, but maybe also a test. What if Clooney was never meant to stick around, but the idea was to show that the world can be changed that radically and still function? What if that scene was a dry run for a larger idea, a timeline that is malleable, the rules are soft, the canon is what makes the most sense for the story at the time? I mean, this is the whole point of having multiverse sagas. They all are kind of in flux. They all operate parallel to one another, simultaneously with one another. I mean, the ending of The Flash kind of showed that. It really kind of opened the door for what the multiverse could do. Could that tie into the DCU? Who knows? But if The Flash is treated like an imperfect memory, one that explains the aesthetic and the tonal overlap between the old and the new, then it suddenly fits. It's not a clean break. It's a bridge, a clunky and very uneven bridge, but a bridge nonetheless. And Superman might be walking right across it. So no, we're probably not going to see Ezra Miller pop up in the Fortress of Solitude. But The Flash isn't gone. It's not erased. Gunn had every opportunity to toss it in the bin and walk away. Instead, he promoted it harder than anything else on DC's 2023 slate. He brought back its director to helm The Brave and the Bold. He brought over its cinematographer for Superman, and he used it to showcase a universe that can rewrite itself on a whim. If that doesn't scream canon, I don't know what does. In the end, maybe The Flash didn't bomb so hard it got forgotten. Maybe it just ran so fast it ended up in a different universe. Gunn's universe. And if that's the case, well, we're all just living in one imperfect memory. Of course, I'm curious to know your thoughts, your opinions. Let me know. Like and subscribe. My name is Matt. I'll talk to you guys later, and peace out.